Everyone thinks Tesla builds cars, but Tesla has quietly been transforming its factories into something much bigger, and almost nobody noticed because they were too busy watching the assembly line. Here's the thing nobody's talking about at the dinner table. The factory itself, not the car, not the badge, not the acceleration numbers, has become Tesla's real product. While the internet argued about paint jobs and delivery numbers, engineers inside Giga Texas were quietly building something that looks less like a car plant and more like a data center that happens to also make vehicles. That's the twist. The story was never about a hidden building. It was about a transformation that happened in broad daylight, right under everyone's nose, because the cameras were pointed at the wrong thing. Let's start with why so many people are still stuck thinking of Tesla as just a car company. For most of the last 2 decades, that's exactly what it was. A scrappy startup trying to prove electric vehicles could be desirable instead of punishing. That story worked. It built loyalty, it built a stock price, it built a cult following strong enough to survive recalls, lawsuits, and a founder who tweets like he's live streaming his own thoughts. But somewhere in the last 2 or 3 years, the company quietly stopped behaving like an automaker and started behaving like an industrial technology platform, and the public conversation never caught up. Think about how strange this actually is. Traditional car companies measure success in units sold and margin per vehicle. Tesla still cares about that, obviously, but internally, the language coming out of shareholder meetings has shifted towards something else entirely. Tesla now describes itself as a physical AI company, not a car company that uses some AI, a company whose core identity is intelligence embedded into physical machines, whether those machines are sedans, humanoid robots, or battery packs sitting next to a substation. That's not marketing fluff, that's a strategic repositioning, and it changes everything about how you should read what's happening inside those factory walls. So here's the second piece of the puzzle. Manufacturing itself is turning into an AI problem instead of a labor problem. For 100 years, the automotive industry solved production the same way. You add more workers, you optimize the line, you squeeze efficiency out of human hands and machine tools working together. Tesla is betting that the next leap in manufacturing doesn't come from faster hands, it comes from smarter systems. Systems that can simulate a production line before it's built, that can train robots to handle tasks nobody explicitly programmed, that can adjust in real time to supply shocks instead of waiting for a manager to notice a problem 3 days later. This is where the golden fact hides in plain sight, the detail almost nobody has connected properly. Tesla shut down its Dojo supercomputer team in the middle of 2025. For years, Dojo was presented as the crown jewel, the secret weapon that would let Tesla train its own artificial intelligence without depending on outside chip suppliers. And then, quietly, the team was dissolved and the workers were reassigned. Elon Musk didn't frame this as a retreat. He framed it as a pivot toward 2 new custom chip programs called AI-5 and AI-6, with AI-5 targeted for production in 2027 and AI-6 following in 2028. Think about what that really means. Tesla didn't abandon the dream of owning its own artificial intelligence infrastructure. It abandoned one specific architecture because a better one was coming, and it was willing to eat the embarrassment of killing a flagship project rather than protect its own ego. That single decision tells you more about how Tesla actually operates than any keynote speech. This is not a company sentimental about its own inventions. It is a company willing to demolish an internal empire the moment the math stops working and rebuild something sharper in its place. That is the industrial logic underneath the surface. Not villains, not geniuses, just a company making brutally pragmatic bets about where compute power needs to live 5 years from now. Now let's talk about where all of that compute power is actually going to sit, because this is where the factories themselves start to look unrecognizable. At Giga Texas, Tesla is building something called Cortex-2, an expansion of on-site artificial intelligence training infrastructure sitting essentially next door to the vehicle assembly lines. Picture that for a second. In the same industrial footprint where workers used to just stamp metal and mount battery packs, there are now server racks humming away, training the exact same neural networks that will later control the cars rolling off that same floor. The factory isn't just producing the vehicle, it's producing the intelligence that will drive it. And Tesla isn't stopping there. The company has publicly stated its plan to more than double its on-site Texas compute capacity during the first half of 2026. Let that sink in. Not double it over 5 years. Double it in 6 months. That is the kind of expansion curve you normally associate with cloud computing giants racing each other to build the next generation of large language models. Not with a company that started out selling roadsters to Silicon Valley engineers who wanted to feel good about their commute. This brings us to the human scale problem, because numbers like gigawatt hours and billions of dollars mean nothing until you translate them into something your brain can actually grip. So let's do that. Tesla's energy storage business deployed 46.7 gigawatt hours worth of Megapack systems across all of 2025, with 14.2 gigawatt hours of that coming in the fourth quarter alone. To put that in perspective, a single gigawatt hour is roughly enough stored energy to power a mid-sized city for several hours during peak demand. Now imagine 46 of those, deployed in a single year, quietly humming away at solar farms, industrial parks, and utility substations most people will never visit. That's not a side business anymore. That's an entire energy company operating inside what people still think of as a car brand. And why does an automaker need that much energy infrastructure? Because artificial intelligence is hungry, almost embarrassingly hungry for electricity. Every training run for these massive neural networks consumes power on a scale that would have sounded absurd a decade ago. Cooling those server rooms, keeping the lights on, keeping the robots charged, all of it requires an industrial scale power supply that most tech companies have to negotiate for through third-party utility contracts. Tesla decided it didn't want to negotiate. It wanted to own the entire loop. Build the batteries, deploy the storage, power the compute, train the intelligence, put that intelligence back into the products. One integrated system instead of 5 separate companies handing off responsibility to each other and blaming one another when something breaks. That loop becomes even clearer when you look at Megafactory Houston, a facility Tesla has explicitly earmarked for producing its next-generation Megapack 3 system, along with something called the Megablock, planned for ramp-up in 2026. This isn't a car factory with a battery wing bolted on as an afterthought. This is a dedicated industrial complex whose entire purpose is manufacturing the energy backbone that keeps the rest of Tesla's artificial intelligence ambitions alive. Battery production, compute training, robotics, and vehicle manufacturing, all feeding into each other, all justified by each other, in a way that makes it nearly impossible to separate where the car company ends and the infrastructure company begins. Now bring Optimus into this picture, because the humanoid robot program is not, as some people assume, a vanity side project designed to generate headlines. Inside Tesla's own strategic framing, Optimus is treated as another output of the exact same manufacturing and artificial intelligence stack powering everything else. Tesla has stated a long-term ambition of reaching production capacity around 1 million robots per year, with Optimus Generation 3 positioned as the version meant to finally scale toward mass production. Whether that timeline holds is genuinely uncertain, and viewers should treat it with healthy skepticism, but the strategic intention is unmistakable. The same compute clusters training Tesla's self-driving software are also training the neural networks meant to let a humanoid robot walk into an unfamiliar room and figure out what to do with its hands. This is the moment where you start to see why comparing Tesla to a traditional automaker completely breaks down. Compare it instead to the companies actually playing in the same weight class. NVIDIA sells the chips that power artificial intelligence, but NVIDIA doesn't operate factories, doesn't produce batteries, doesn't build robots. It's a supplier, an extraordinarily powerful one, but a supplier nonetheless. Amazon integrates logistics, warehousing, and cloud computing at a staggering scale, but it doesn't manufacture vehicle hardware or energy storage systems with anything close to Tesla's vertical depth. Microsoft and OpenAI live almost entirely in software and compute, with no factory floors of their own to speak of. Apple comes closest in spirit, tightly integrating design, software, and custom silicon into one polished product line, but Apple has never tried to build industrial-scale energy infrastructure or humanoid robotics as part of that stack. And then there's BYD, genuinely impressive in its own right, vertically integrated across vehicles and battery production in a way that rivals or even exceeds Tesla in raw manufacturing volume, but without the explicit artificial intelligence compute and robotics layer that Tesla has been building on top of its factories. Put simply, nobody else is trying to run this exact combination. Chips, compute, batteries, energy storage, humanoid robots, and vehicles, all manufactured under the philosophy that the factory is not a place where a finished design gets assembled, but a living system that keeps improving the intelligence of everything it produces. That is the strategy hiding in plain sight behind the headline about a factory nobody was supposed to see. Nobody hid anything. The individual pieces were all announced publicly, in shareholder letters, in earnings calls, in Musk's own interviews. What almost nobody did was connect them into a single coherent picture, because it's genuinely hard to hold 5 different industries in your head at once and realize they've quietly become departments of the same company. So here's the provocative question worth sitting with for a moment. The kind of question that should start an actual argument in your group chat tonight. If Tesla's biggest advantage stops being the car itself and becomes the manufacturing and artificial intelligence system underneath it, does that mean traditional automakers, the ones still thinking purely in terms of horsepower and infotainment screens, are already playing a game they can't win, no matter how good their next vehicle looks on paper? Or is Tesla overextending itself, spreading its engineering talent and capital across too many frontiers at once? Robotics, chips, energy, autonomy, betting the entire company on a vision that could just as easily collapse under its own complexity if even one piece of that loop falls behind schedule. Both arguments are defensible. That's exactly what makes this worth watching closely over the next 2 years. Because here's the honest caveat this documentary owes you. Not everything discussed here is a locked-in certainty. Some of it is company statement rather than independently verified fact. Optimus mass production by the end of 2026 is Tesla's own stated target, not a guaranteed outcome. The idea that Tesla already operates a fully functioning artificial intelligence industrial empire is still, honestly, more aspiration than finished reality. What is verified independently through reporting and disclosure is the direction of travel. The Dojo shutdown happened. Cortex 2 is under construction. Megafactory Houston is real and scheduled. The chip roadmap toward AI 5 and AI 6 is real. The energy storage numbers are real. The destination is still being built, but the road toward it is no longer speculation. And that brings us to the real revelation this whole investigation has been building toward. Tesla isn't simply building better factories. It is building factories that produce intelligence, energy, robots, and vehicles as one integrated industrial system, where each piece justifies and strengthens every other piece. The battery plant makes the compute cluster possible. The compute cluster trains the robot. The robot eventually builds the next battery plant faster than human hands ever could. That loop, once it fully closes, is not something any traditional car company, and honestly very few technology companies of any kind, currently have the infrastructure or the willingness to attempt. So the next time you walk past a Tesla in a parking lot, or watch one glide silently through an intersection, remember that the car in front of you might be the smallest part of the story. Somewhere behind it sits a factory that no longer thinks like a factory, quietly training the next version of itself, 1 gigawatt hour and 1 chip generation at a time. To not be caught off guard by what's coming next in this industry, the batteries, the chips, the robots quietly reshaping the ground under every driveway in the country, join us here because this transformation is only getting started, and the next chapter is going to move faster than anyone in the industry is currently admitting out loud.